evening, everybody. It's super to be here. Thank you for joining us in this, starting the day with this, what we hope will be a fantastic conversation with Prashan. Before we get going, I would like to acknowledge anyone on the call. It's a First Nations person to Australia, and I would like to also acknowledge that I am on Kaurna land of the Adelaide Plains, and specifically I am at Wittunga, which is where the Torrens River comes to the sea, and Wittunga means place of reeds. So it's a beautiful sunny day here this morning. I hope you're all well and you've got a coffee or a water. This is a safe place for any conversations that you want to have. We're going to have a Q&A later on, but to get going straight away, because I know we're going to want to talk for days, I would like to introduce Prashan Paramanathan to you. It is my great honour to host this conversation this morning, and I have to confess that I have spent the last 2 days deep in Chuffed, making donations to all sorts of incredible causes, and also becoming aware of the work that Chuffed.org and the crowdfunding platform is, it's fighting some of the injustices in the world. So honour and respect to you, Prashan. But for the formal introduction, I'm going to read to you. Prashan is the founder and CEO of Chuffed.org, a crowdfunding platform that helps people raise funds for social cause projects. It has already raised more than $65 million for over 13,000 organisations. Chuffed started its life as a charity, then converted structure into a public benefit company, raising a seed equity round of $1.1 million led by Blackbird Ventures. We're going to hear more about that journey soon. It was the first time that any Australian tech VC had invested in a social enterprise. Now, since growing to be the largest social cause crowdfunding platform in Australia, Chuffed.org has positioned itself as an established global company with a strong presence beyond our borders. It's a really interesting journey. I just remember that I forgot to introduce myself, so I just will quickly take a moment to do that. My name is Sarah Gunn. I am founder and CEO of a social enterprise called GOGO Events, where we use events to create pathways to employment for women who live on the margins, that are homeless or at risk of homelessness or facing complex barriers to employment. So I have lots of questions about investment, etc. for you, Prashan. So welcome, thank you. How are you today, Prashan?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
My pleasure. We're going to get straight into it. So where I would like my first question to you is, what was your motivation to start Chuffed? And I've got my own little question is, did you have a pressing issue and no means to fund it?
I didn't. I mean, my background's in the non-profit and international development world. So I spent a year in China working on international development projects, and then I spent about 5 years in Australia working in the non-profit sector. And the thing that struck me through that work was that, you know, we all, as like the average punter, know all the really big charities. We probably can rattle off about a dozen of them. But there's 600,000 registered nonprofits and a lot more kind of unregistered groups that are doing incredible work that nobody's ever heard of and that struggle to get any money and recognition and to climb up the ladder. And those organizations, I think, were the ones that were making real change happen. And so we wanted to do something about that. Like, we wanted to help those organizations raise the money that they needed to get started to do the work that they need to do.
And in your vision to help them, where did you start? What was the, did you start with, I need to go and get the money to build a platform? Or did you just use someone else's platform? What, just a snippet of that journey?
I mean, we had no money, right? So, and this was a side project at the start. And so we had seen, I mean, the other part of the bit is that we had seen our friends who were, doctors, lawyers, consultants, accountants, getting kind of bored with how charity fundraising was happening. They were getting tired of being harassed on the street, and they still kind of wanted to contribute. And we thought, look, can you create a better experience for them? And what we saw was that in the creative sector, this kind of crowdfunding thing was just taking off, and people having this kind of great donor experience. And so we very naively thought, like, can you take some of those ideas and port them into the nonprofit sector? And so we started just building. We didn't have any money, and so we had to outsource it on Elance and whatever Elance is now called. I think it's something else now. But we spent a couple of grand getting it built out of Pakistan and India, and then we had a product to show people. It wasn't a very good one, but it worked.
What year was that, Prashan?
That was 2013.
13. And can I ask you, we're going to jump ahead quite quickly here to, when did you first think that your product was eligible, if you could find a VC organization that would support you? How at what time, what year was that?
That would have been 2015. So we were very lucky in that the early years we got a grant from the Telstra Foundation. So we got, I mean, I understand now in reflection how lucky this was. We got 460 grand as a grant from the Telstra Foundation off the back of, like, a PowerPoint presentation and some screenshots of what it was going to look like. So it was a very fortunate start. And then it was probably about 2015. I wouldn't say we kind of like realized we were eligible. We just hit this point where we were growing. We had kind of opened up shop internationally, but we realized that you can't play to be biggest in Australia in this space. You had to play to be biggest in the world. And so to do that, we need to raise more money. It's very hard to raise more philanthropic money when your pitch is like, we're big, we want to be huge. It's a lot easier to raise it when you're like, we've got the shiny new idea. And so we wanted to raise equity, which meant that we had to convert and had to go and talk to investors at that point. I'm not sure we kind of like, we did out of necessity more than anything.
So fantastic. So could you share with us, when you say we, was it you at the beginning and, a friend that you dragged along, or a partner, and where are you at now staff-wise, and how big your...
Yeah, so there was two of us originally. I was kind of more full-time, and the person who worked on it on the side. And then when we got the Telstra money, there was 2 full-time employees. We're now at 6 full-time employees, one based in London, the rest kind of Sydney and surrounds.
I think it just goes to show, 6 people changing the world is pretty powerful, isn't it? So can you tell me a little bit about behind the, I'm just going to look at my notes, for the opt-in donation. So could you tell us about how you keep food on the table for your family when the people running the campaigns have no cost associated with using the Chuffed platform?
Yeah, so back when we started in 2013, one of the big things that we wanted to change was the transparency around donations. People were like very worried about, like, where is my money going? And so we took this view that, like, we're going to make this the most transparent that we can make it by going, if you give $100 goes straight through. Then there's card fees that you have to pay to the card provider on top of that. And then you can choose how much you give to us. So it's going to be an optional tip. Sounds like a terrible business model. And we based it off like Kiva at the time, who was the only other platform that was doing that. fast forward to now, that is the market model now, because people, so all the platforms, I would say all the platforms, but a lot of the platforms who were previously taking a cut, normally you take a 5% cut, that was about the market rate. They have switched over to doing optional donations. I don't think driven by transparency, I think driven by it makes you about the same amount of money or a bit more money than if you had taken a cut. So I don't worry about it. It actually kind of ends up financially probably being better than taking a cut.
And yet it's quite a big risk to take, right? Now I'm hearing that you had some funding, and I think from a social enterprise perspective, and all startups, really, you need that first client or that first investment, so you've got something to sustain your team with, and then having that funding, did that then help you manage cash flow, with the optional giving? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we I'll be upfront and transparent about it. It's only in the last financial year that Chuffed as an organization has reported a profit. So it took the both rounds of initial investment grants to get us to the stage where we had enough scale that the optional donation model stacks up.
Amazing. Okay, I wanted to dive in there a bit because I am aware that on the call there are several people that are, have a social enterprise idea or that are midway, and for all of us, there are questions that are ever present, and you often can't get real clarity around that. You think, how am I going to, such a leap of faith to say I'm just going to rely on people's generosity and their drive for a cause to build this business and make it robust and sustainable and pay salaries, because as we know, as often as social entrepreneurs, you're the last one to get paid. So we're trying to shift that model. Anyway, thank you for that deep dive. One more question around, do you feel that you were the first organisation, the first time any Australian tech VC invested in a social enterprise? So this was groundbreaking, really. Have you seen a shift in what VCs might fund as a result of you leading the way?
I think the attitude has definitely shifted. I'm not sure we necessarily cause that shift, I'm sure but when we started fundraising, there was very varied responses to our pitch amongst both the tech VC community and the impact investment community. Now, I think across the board, everyone cared about the numbers before they cared about the impact, whether you were impact first investor or whether you were a VC fund. But the VC funds varied dramatically in their response. There were people like Blackbird who kind of got it, and they were like, actually, you've got traction, you've got great people, there's a big market here, you can create a sizable business here. And then there were people where I pictured them and their response was like, either my kind of rich friend who should probably just give you a grant, or I feel kind of dirty and uncomfortable making money off this charity stuff. That was kind of the response, or there's no way any sort of charity stuff could ever make a sizable business. So you got that kind of range of responses, but going in, it was very hard to change people's mind on that. Now, I think in the 5 years since that round, people have seen massive ethical businesses boom. I've seen Beyond Meat and go to being $1 billion company. And they've seen health tech and ed tech companies kind of grow and scale. So I think people have just seen like that attitude is just not true, and they've adapted to what the market is showing them.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. There is a shift, but I live in a little bit of a social enterprise bubble. I feel the shift, so it's interesting to see if our experience is real. You know, when I reflect on what else is happening around in the world, and you know, I'm conscious: are we in this little social good?
I think like in the social enterprise world, it is definitely like a variation, like a separation between like small cottage scale businesses, which are great and like make really good impact, and we support a lot of them, and the ones that want to be massive, like businesses. And I'm not sure, like, you know, VC and the investment community has like a model for the ones that want to be small and serve their community. But they're increasingly seeing an opportunity in the ones that want to scale.
Yeah, great. Super. Now let's dive into some of your favorite Chuffed campaigns. Are there one or two that you would like to share with us that have really resonated with you individually or resonated with the community at large?
This is like trying to choose my favorite child. I mean, let me talk to you about one that's running right now. You might have donated to it overnight, but it's a story by a woman, an Iranian woman, Eli Shakiba, who was detained in the prison camps in Nauru, and has fortunately escaped to LA. She's an architect and an artist, and the story that she's fundraising for a documentary to show some of the secret video footage that she was recorded on her time in Nauru. And the angle of the documentary, I think, is fascinating, because she as an architect saw how we structured, and the story is about how we structured the camps to most effectively torture the people in the camps. And she's going to create a model of the camps from her video footage and from her recollections of it, and tell the story about the architecture and the design of those camps and how to use design to dehumanize people, which I think is just like, it's a fascinating story to tell, and it's like a necessary story to tell. But it's, I mean, I can't wait to see how that kind of plays out. She's already raised, she needs 16 grand. She's already raised 20 something. So now they're going to fund the entire production of it on Chuffed.
She's got a little bit more this morning, I'd like to add.
Thank you for that.
What I really noticed in the last diving into the issues was how not only is it a platform to fund, pressing social issues, that it's what it did this morning. I've just shared it with all my friends. I've said for too long I have, been angry about the Australian government's treatment of people on refugees on Nauru, and I haven't voiced that opinion. So today what I did was, with that rage that that tends to come when you see this injustice, is I was able to share it on my social straight away. I didn't think about it, gone out on Facebook going, finally, I've been quiet on this for too long. This story needs to be told, and here's a really simple way to support it. So that was my lesson this morning, and I've got my fingers crossed for two reasons. One is I'd love to come back to your new Amplify initiative on Chuffed. So can we just park that for 1 minute? But I also need to fess up that I am the co-founder of an organisation called Collab for Good, which is about bringing people together to collaborate on ideas. It's also a social enterprise intermediary, the first in South Australia. And during the bushfires, we started our own Chuffed campaign, and it was a resilience fund, and the money was where female business owners, actually anyone, but it was predominantly female owners, contributed money into a fund that we then gave out to women's businesses who were suffering because of either the early impact of COVID and also the bushfires on Kangaroo Island. And it had a profound impact. It wasn't a huge fund. It was $6,000. We were able to give out money. So I have seen, I have firsthand experience of the program. But now so I got a bit caught up there because I wanted to share that with you. So I have a little bit of inside experience.
Look, I'm always happy to hear a customer success story.
But I think there's what I'm feeling now is that there's so much more to do. So let's move on to some of the gutsier topics here, because what I feel that that you're doing at Chuffed is you're really picking up on perhaps what the founders of democracy, maybe, I don't know, this might be giving them a bit too much credit, thought democracy might do, which is allow individuals and everyday citizens to vote with their, with their vote. Do you want to share any thoughts on that with us?
Yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the campaigns that we support is about shifting where power resides. And it's shifting power from people who have it to people who don't. And I think one of the big risks that we have in our current democratic model is that if you have like money and power, which often go together, you can buy more money and power. And we've kind of built this model of that money and power being concentrated more and more. And in every iteration of that, fewer people get more of that. And so you're leaving a whole chunk of people behind. And so what we're trying to do is support people who are trying to aggregate the rest of us together and fight against that structure. And you see some of that, like one of the earliest campaigns that we helped fund was Kathy McGowan down in Indi. It was a small campaign related to her political campaign. So she was a long-held Liberal seat with Sophie Mirabella in that seat, who was a much disliked candidate who didn't really represent the electorate down there. And there was a grassroots campaign to introduce participatory democracy into that seat. And it got up, and Kathy created, and the people of Indi, I should say, created a model that a lot of other communities around the country have been replicating. So we had a number of campaigns in the last election supporting independent candidates to try and get up, and we've been kind of working behind the scenes to try and figure out how we do that. But so many of these things, like those people who are like trying to fight the structures of power, have no access to money often, and so but they have like really powerful stories to tell and powerful ideas to share. And if we can help them spread those ideas and tell those stories, I think that's our contribution.
Incredible. So that significant political change that you're creating. One campaign that I'm aware of, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name, but it's happening in Melbourne. It's a result of the impact of COVID-19 and food insecurity, is called Food Connect in Melbourne. Are you aware of that campaign? I see it's raised over $600,000 on Chuffed at present. If you're not aware of it, it's all the social enterprises and all the charities coming together to share their knowledge around, around food security for people at risk. And the reason I bring that up, because I can see your platform operating on many levels. So one is about self-organisation. Well, actually, you probably self-organisation happens in all of them, but it's bringing communities together. And then in this other one, you've got very significant goals around politics. Have you seen through Chuffed any significant policy change that has been a direct or indirect result of a campaign that you might have run on the platform?
Yes, I mean, so it just be worth just zooming back a little bit to see like how we think about this social change actually happening. Like our view is that for social change to happen, you need the activists and the bridge builders. Like you need the kind of like WWF. Sorry, you need like the Greenpeaces to be, calling up polls and say, hey, we're going to picket your supermarkets with 100,000 people unless you kind of implement a plastic ban policy. And you need the kind of like WWFs who have like corporate partnership with Coles to go like, here's our like plastic ban policy. So like, I think you need both of those players in the mix to get policy change, to get social change happening. We tend to do, we support both, but we tend to support like the activists a lot. So in the marriage equality plebiscite, we helped the equality campaign raise 100 grand to put ads up for the yes vote. We ran a campaign with Simon Holmes Court for the Kids Off Nauru campaign, which contributed to getting those kids off Nauru. We fight a lot of legal cases which set important precedents. So Groundswell Gloucester, which is like this incredible group of community scientists, citizen scientists, and just local community who didn't want a coal mine in their backyard, fought against a very well-resourced mining company and established a precedent in the Planning Commission of climate change being a grounds to deny a coal mine, which has like incredible like flow-on effect and impact. So, I mean, there's a number of different ways that we do it. We kind of tend to kind of support the rebel rousers and the activists, because you need that pressure for anything else to happen. But also we support the lawyers in suits as well.
And you know what I loved about that campaign you were just referring to is that the focus on your platform is of 10 normal people celebrating outside a building with just joy on their faces, and it really pulled back to me. This is about individual people fighting for their rights or for the rights of others.
And these are normal people. Like, they didn't ask for this to happen to them. Like, this happened to them and they had to respond. And they had, how do you fight a gigantic, well-resourced mining company? Like, how do you actually do that as an individual? And you can't. You have to like join up with other people, and that's where you get your strength.
Incredible. We are doing quite well with time. I know we're going to go to some questions at some point, and but I'm going to ask you a question, if that's all right now, outside of Chuffed, is what's the biggest disruption that you would like to see in the world, if you could choose something or several things?
Yeah, a lot of the fight that I've personally been fighting of late is to figure out how do I use my voice and position to fight injustices, and how do you encourage other people to do it. And so, I mean, this is a very kind of roundabout way of answering your question. But the thing that I want to see is people feeling like they're not going to lose their jobs. They're not going to lose their position in society. They're not going to be shamed if they speak out about the injustices they see. I want people to feel comfortable doing that, and feel empowered doing that, and to know that we've got your back if you do. And if we can do that, I think that's how you start taking power back.
Very provocative, thought that in my social enterprise, it's all about bringing your whole self to work. All the damage that you have, all the human conditioning, all the mental health issues, all the best you have, the positive, the powerful skills that you might possess and your unique abilities. And we're in the thick of that, wanting people to express themselves. And also we're a B Corp at GOGO Events, and part of the B Corp philosophy is you are rewarded as a business for having individuals that are volunteering for different things, or you're paying them to go and contribute their time to other organizations. So I think it's a dream, and I feel it's a tangible dream actually to get what you see is possible. But I haven't operated in big siloed governments. Businesses for some time, nor within government. So I hope that they have some similar philosophy. So thank you very much, Prashan. I think it's question time now. Danielle is magically behind the scenes here, and she is
I'm online. Hello.
Here she is. Hooray, just in the nick of time.
Morning, everyone. I was just saying, word of warning if you hear my dog or my boyfriend making coffee in the kitchen. I'm sitting on the kitchen table, so that's it. Thank you so much for that conversation. Really, I stand in admiration of your work, and it's really great to have you here today. We did have a question from Ali, who is actually the founder of Code Like a Girl, which is an amazing enterprise supporting women in tech and helping upskill girls in areas like how to code and build websites, etc. So also a big admirer of what you do, Ali, and I'm sure I did not give that description any credit. It's much more than that. But Ali has asked, did taking on investment change your mindset or mental health as an entrepreneur? Or was there a cultural shift in your team?
We were very fortunate in that we got the right investors. And I think there were times where we would have said yes to the wrong investors had they offered us money. But I'm kind of lucky that they said no. So Nikki and the Blackbird team were very much of the view that we want to invest in founders who are doing their life's work who don't want to sell. And so they weren't interested in getting a return quickly. They were always interested in supporting me as a founder. And that does, like, that has a profound impact on you, but probably not in the way that you would like expect. Like, they weren't trying to eke out a return. They were just trying to make sure I was supported to do the work that I needed to do. So I think it had a really positive impact on the culture. I think, like, you know, the change in how you operate, right? Because in the VC model, you spend a lot, and so you burn through money, and it's like good to be running a negative line on your P&L. Is stressful, yeah, like, because you always have a runway. We were lucky that we got it to a scale where we are now profitable, and so we have a decent balance sheet, and so we don't need to take on money. And at that stage, Blackbird has also been super supportive. So I think I'll be very cautious about who you get into bed with, because you are kind of marrying them for a long time. But if you get the right person, it can actually help a lot.
Can I chime in there? Because I know lovely Ali is a GOGO venture, like, and so is GOGO. So we're very lucky to have this incredibly supportive network of women investing in women. And overnight I was thinking, Prashan, about how the structures of investment, from impact or debt or credit or equity, are actually really shifting at the minute. Because in a way, even the CEO model is a little bit like crowdfunding, where people give money and then they give it out again, and then you give it back, and then that goes in perpetual fund. But you do hear stories of organisations that sell their soul, and also those that have to sell their soul because of the demands of their investors. But also often where you see that times 10 at the bottom of a proposal, where people are expecting, the traditional VC model is expecting you to, exit, and they're going to make 10 times their money. It's just not realistic for so many social businesses.
Yeah, I mean, the worst terms that I saw on term sheets were from impact investors. Like, I saw like a 2 times participating liquidation preference on a term sheet, which may not mean anything to like everyone, but is like a horrendous like term, I think, to write into an early stage venture term sheet. But I tended to just saw them on the impact investment side rather than like the tech VC side, which may sound weird, but like, that's my experience.
I don't know, Danny, if you've seen a great question here from Julie. She says, hi, Prashan, would you be able to talk a little bit more about your work or posts regarding tackling structural racism and how this has been received in the Australian charity sector? Great question, Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So I think for a lot of people in my situation, last June was a tough time. I think we went from being okay, kind of skating through society. And if you'd asked me, like, what is it like being a brown man in the nonprofit sector, I would say, like, it's fine. So after June, if you had asked me that question, I would have paused for a long while, because you start playing back like so many things that you've seen, and it became very hard to not say anything at that point. And so, I mean, for context, I basically pulled the images of the top 5 foundations in Australia and their board directors. Like, these are the people who make the decisions around where the money goes. And they're all like 40 directors, and they're all white. And then I pulled the faces of who the top foundation in Australia gives to, and the CEOs or founders of those organizations were all white. And I'm like, that's not an accident. That's by design. And so I, posted about it, and the response was, I mean, largely the response from people of color was pretty supportive. People of color and white women were very supportive, generally speaking. What I wasn't expecting was 2 responses. One was from women of color in our sector. And I, like, pretty naively just hadn't really thought about what their experience was. And it came in droves about how women of color are treated in the charity sector. And it wasn't pretty, it's not my story to share. So I won't do that. But, like, the thing that I realized is that Black women, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women in our sector have been saying the same things that I had said, and nobody paid them any attention. They were the angry Black women in their organisation. And then women of colour, immigrants to Australia, had said the same thing, and they kind of generally got palmed off. And then a man of colour said it, and they wrote an article about it, and they started, and kind of like makes you wonder, like, what if a white man says the same thing? Like, maybe something will happen. So I wasn't expecting that, and that was kind of my ignorance. But I also wasn't expecting the response from white male former colleagues in the sector. I was very these like responses were very stark. Like, they really broke down into these buckets. And some were like, I support you, like what you're saying, but I could never like publicly like or comment on what you're saying because I need their money. And some were somewhere you should be more grateful for what you've got. Like, there was one person who wrote that email, copied in one of the directors of Chuffed as like, an exercise of their power in the situation. And that was like the level of reflection that they had. And I'm not sure what I'm going to like do with that. Like,
no, Prashan, I can see, how deeply challenging that has been for you, and thank you for.
But like, it's not at all as challenging as it is for like women of color in this. Like, I can play act white well enough to do well in the sector, but it's much harder if you're a woman.
It's much harder, and the stats around the VC funding for women, I think the last was 4% of VC funding goes to women. If you're a woman of colour, it's 0.4% of VC money goes to women of colour. There's a little bit of hope on the horizon. In the US this year, the 5 GOGO Ventures are not banging that drum, but I just want to tell you that all 5 ventures are led by women of colour, led and owned by women of colour.
And Alan Hamilton and Backstage Capital over there are just like doing an amazing job in funding and supporting women of colour founders. Like there is like a lot of bright sparks. Whether they can fight the system, like I hope they can.
Could you mention those names again? Just that you mention them.
Yeah, I mean,
have a look at them.
Alan Hamilton is the founder of Backstage Capital, and she coined this phrase, which I quite like, is that she invests in not underrepresented founders. She invests in underestimated founders. Which I quite liked.
Yeah, that's great.
Just jumping in there, I'm just going to post links to those sites and also your Twitters as well for the audience. I've actually listened to quite a few podcasts, surrounding the Backstage Capital evolution, and it's an incredible story. I am just going to give a time warning. Sorry.
And I think we've got 2 more minutes.
Yeah. So we just have one last quick question from Sally. What has been the most rewarding part of your journey?
Oh, it's like super easy question, because it is sitting with our campaigners and after like they've got money, like there is nothing. Like there was the other week, I was sitting on a call with Ellie Shakiba, who was the former Nauru detainee Iranian architect, and like she was just so happy that she could get the software and she could like pay for it to be able to model the camp really well, and that is such a joy. It is like so incredible when you have those moments. That's like working with our campaigners is like what I live for.
I'm sure it must be so rewarding. I can only imagine because how many members, or not members as such, how many projects have you facilitated on your platform?
I think it's like 13,000 or so.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I think you needed a round of applause for that. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you, as always, Sarah, for being an amazing supporter of all things impact and social entrepreneurship, and helping us in facilitating this event today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope it gave you a lot of food for thought to start your morning off with. I do want to thank AWS for powering this series. If you're not familiar with Southstart and what we do, head over to our website. We've been running several online conversations, really intended to just draw out some of the more deep and meaningful insights that are gathered by founders along their journey that you may not necessarily be exposed to in your day-to-day. So thank you, Prashan, for sharing a snippet of your journey. I'm sure there's a lot more under the hood there. If you do want to connect further, I've posted the Twitter links in here. Sarah, I think you're on GOGO Events. I'm not sure if you're personal Twitter.
Thank you.
And I do want to announce that in 9 minutes' time, as I'm looking at my notifications, we're actually launching our festival, FOMO promo tickets. So Southstart is an experience set to bring people together and connect you to ideas, to possibility, to skills. In a number of ways, we go across everything from emerging sectors to impact to creative industries, really looking at bringing together people that are, like you mentioned before, Prashan, really dedicating their life to a cause, and making sure that those voices are coming together, figuring out where we stand alone and where we stand together and how we move forward together based on the simple connection pieces that we all share, one being our humanity. So yeah, check out the festival. We're launching that in 8 minutes now. And I don't want to detract from the importance of this conversation in talking about that any further. So just go on and check it out after. In the meantime, this conversation will be recorded. It has been recorded, and it will be available on our social channels and further afar. And thank you again for the 100th time. I really appreciate you both joining us today and having a candid chat for the benefit of others that are on this journey. So have an amazing day. I will go and feed my puppy now because he's stuck plastic under the table. And I'll talk to you both very soon, and everyone in the virtual audience, feel free to connect with us further beyond this call. It'd be great to meet you in person.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Prashan.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Danny.